issue that is found among evangelical Christians is the fact that their young people are leaving their faith. For one reason or another, these children had faith at the early part of their lives, or maybe they'd never developed a faith of their own, and when they got to be adults, they didn't know what to exactly do with their faith. In this video today, we want to look a little bit at moral development and spiritual development to see what parents can purposely do to help their children to learn more about how to follow their faith even as they become an adult. A lot of the material that we'll be looking at in this video came from George Barna's book called Transforming Children into Spiritual Champions, and so we'll make sure to give credit to him. One thing when we think about children and how they grow up, that each of us as parents have different things that we're concerned about as they begin to grow up. Sometimes it will be the moral thing. We want our kids to know the difference between right and wrong, and so we try to teach them that every single day. Then there's the spiritual, where we want them to understand their faith and to be able to grow and strengthen their faith in everything that they do. And there's also the physical, that we want our kids to eat right and go out there and to keep themselves fit as they possibly can, because we know that it ends up affecting them in the long run at the end of their life, and so we want their physical needs to be taken care of. Also, the emotional needs of our children, we want that taken care of. Obviously, as a parent, if we see a child as being depressed or having any type of anxiety or any worry at all, we simply want to make sure those worries they have will go away as quick as possible. And so we do become concerned about the emotional stability of our children. And we also look at the intellectual ability of our children. That we want to make sure they get to the right schools and make sure they learn the right things so they can have a career later on down the road. Now, there's several other things that could have gone on this list, but these are the 5 main things that parents look at when it comes to their concerns for their children. The only problematic piece about this picture is that usually the spiritual side of this is what's left out. That we have young men and women who know the difference between right and wrong. They are physically healthy, emotionally healthy, and intellectually healthy, but for one reason or another, their spiritual lives are not where they need to be. And it's my personal belief that until they get their spiritual life in its proper place, that none of these other areas will ever really grow in a way in which it should. And so what we want to do is to go to some specifics out of this book to see some things to help give us an idea of what's going on with today's youth. According to the study by George Barna, 93% of young people see themselves as Christian by age 13. Now, first glance, this is a very encouraging statistic. It shows that many kids are wanting to follow their faith and be able to have a faith in the Christian faith. Only problem with this is that just because someone says they're a Christian, or just because someone follows and do a certain thing, they may or may not be actually following their own belief system. And so we want to kind of dig a little bit deeper. So what is their faith really built upon? And so when it comes to how the decisions are made, and these are decisions are made about this 93% of people who are Christians, 37% of them base their decision on personal feelings. Whatever makes me feel good, whatever is right in this situation, this is what I end up doing. And so my personal feelings are my guide. 26% is based on expectation of others. What does my mom and dad think about it? What does my coach think about it? My girlfriend or boyfriend? What do others expect out of me? And so we see 26% being more concerned about that when they make their decisions. And sadly, only 8% base their decisions on the Bible, that the Bible ends up guiding them in the things they do every single day. Now, obviously, we would like that percentage to be quite a bit higher than that, but according to the study, this is where things are currently with America's children. Now, going back to these 93%, 75% of them believe the following: that the devil simply does not exist. And once again, these are Christians. The devil, he simply does not exist. He's a fairy tale or something we've heard to keep us doing the right thing, something to scare us. And so he simply doesn't exist. Or we earn our way to heaven by doing good things. As long as I'm a good person and do good things and help other people, that's all I have to do. And by that, I end up earning my way to heaven. And so sacrifice, things of that nature, that none of that comes to the pictures, are simply based upon them doing what they feel is right and doing those good things. Now, 50% or more of them believe the following: that life simply has no meaning. This is kind of, I guess, disturbing to see that they don't really see a bigger picture for their life. that every day is lived as his last day. There's a saying called YOLO now. You only live once. And basically they're saying you do what you want to do today because tomorrow may or may not come. And so since life has no meaning, we don't put any meaning in relationships we have. We don't put too much stock in anything. And so there's no really forward-looking process with this type of mindset. Also, there's no absolute standards for morals and ethics. That each person gets to make their own rules. This is part of that postmodern viewpoint that what's good for me is good for me, and what's good for you is good for you. And we can't stand in judgment of each other, because if we do that, then there's something wrong. And so there is no certain thing as truth, at least according to their opinion. And also, we have no real say in how our lives unfold. And what they're basically saying here is that their life is pretty much already set for them. They have zero control. They're pretty much victims of their circumstances. And it's just they've been dealt a bad hand of cards in their life, and they pretty much play whatever comes up next because they don't believe they have any say-so in what goes on in their life. And also, something when Jesus lived on earth, he committed sins. That, he wasn't holy like he said he was. He wasn't the one who kept his promises like he said and stayed away from sin. And so once again, if these are the viewpoints of those kids who say they're Christians, those who say they have a faith in God, then my concern is that something is not going right. We see in Deuteronomy 6 verses 1 through 9. I want to read through that with you to see what it is that we can do to help these children. And this passage basically says that children need to be taught how to think and act in relationship to God and his way. And the passage begins this way. These are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, O Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your father, has promised you. At the beginning of this passage, we see that these are something that the parents are responsible for teaching. These commands, these decrees, the parents are told this is what they're supposed to be teaching to their children. That it's not the youth group's responsibility, it's not the pastor's responsibility, it's not the youth minister's responsibility to teach my kids about God primarily. That the primary focus goes to me as a parent to be able to teach them what to do. And in this, the second part says that we do this so that children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live. That these children, that they will be able to understand and fear God, have a holy reverence of him. And the children who come after them will also want to fear God and have a holy reverence of him. And so this is the gift that we are able to give to our children from generation to generation, is the ability to have faith and have them to understand who God is and how he is connected with their life. In this section of scripture, it says, these commandments I give you today are to be upon your hearts. That these are points of reference that we come back to every single day, that we should be so familiar with what God's teachings are that it becomes a natural part of what we do. And so the author here gives us a few ways in which this happens. He says they talk about it when you sit at home, tie them as a symbol to your hands, bind them on the forehead, write them on the door frame of your houses and on your gates. And you notice all these verses here these words that are highlighted are action verbs. There's action behind each and every one of these things. That it's not going to be accidental that the children know about God. That they have to be taught from someone. That someone has to continue to speak on these things day in and day out. In everyday conversations, we try to find ways in which we help them to see how decisions are made and how that affects them in their spiritual life. And the more and more in which we do this, it helps them to understand and see how God is actively working in their life. Next, we want to look at the work of James Fowler. He is a developmental psychologist who works at the Candler School of Theology at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. In this faith development stages here, we want to walk through these and get a kind of a picture to help you see where your clients may be as they try to process their faith development stage. Now, obviously, you have choice on whether or not you use this in the sessions, but I think this will at least give you a picture of what it looks like when we talk about faith development. And for James Fowler, his first step is what he calls primary faith. This is derived from the infant's initial experience of being sufficiently cared for by their parents. Recently, we talked about reactive attachment disorder and how if a child doesn't make the right connections at the beginning of their life, then they end up not connecting, having difficulty connecting with anybody else. And so what primary faith is, these children want to know that someone is listening out to their needs. That when your baby cries that first time and you run in there because you're a new parent, have no idea why they're crying, the fact that they know they can get you to respond helps them to know that they're being cared for. When they know they need to be fed, when they know they need to be changed, these simple things in life that is actually very important to them, as you respond to them, you're beginning this experience of faith. There's something bigger, there's something better than me that is taking care of me and helping me to sustain my life. And so that primary faith is where I think everyone begins. Next is what we call intuitive projective faith. This is when children begin to form a conscious image of God through stories. You'll see many people will have maybe children's Bibles. They have a lot of pictures in there. And there's pictures of Jesus in there, Moses, all these different people. And it helps them to get a conscious image of who God is. And so we see how God acts in these stories. And the kids end up learning learning from this. And so they may see the picture of Jesus as we kind of get that maybe the blue-eyed Jesus in our mindset right now. Or God as this picture of someone with long white hair and a long beard. I'm not sure why I get that image in my head. But kids get picture images in their head to help them once again to project their faith out. And so the more they know about God, the more stories they hear about Him, the more they can learn about them. And so you'll notice a lot of times in preschool age kids, a lot of storytelling is being done because that helps them to build their faith. Next is called mythical literal faith. And the children's understanding of God is largely a projection from human characteristics they find present in godly characters and stories. What we're talking about here is that these young people are able to read God's Word and they're able to see good things and bad things. They're able to look at the characteristic traits of people in these stories and help them to apply them to themselves. That when you tell us a story of Samson and Delilah, they're able to understand what it means to trick somebody. When we see Job and he's being upset, they're finally able to understand what it means to grieve. And so what's going on here is they're looking at these human characteristics and learning what's good and what's bad. And so you'll see kids at this stage getting very literal when it comes to their faith. There's certain rules you have to follow that good people do A, B, and C, and bad people do A, B, and C. And so everything is pretty concrete in this stage of their development. Next is what we call synthetic conventional faith. This is when children integrate their abstract religious ideas and concepts into a coherent belief system. What's going on in this process is the children begin to understand more about their faith. It's probably around the pre-teenage to the early teenage stage. And they begin to look around them and they kind of make their own faith. The problem that's going on, at least in this faith, that many children's faith is based simply off what their parents have told them. Or whoever is important to them in their life, they listen to them and they get ideas from them. And because of that, that's where their faith is built. For many people, this is about as far as they get in life. That whatever the mom and dad told them, whatever their parents have brought them up believing, they go to their grave believing that because they never have really made their faith their own. And this is the group of people that simply end up falling away or don't stay active in the church or are active following God in keeping their faith because they never have really developed their own faith. There's something they're living off of their parents. Then you have individuative reflexive faith. This is a process of anchoring faith within self that is often accompanied by examining the previous stages of faith. I can remember going through college and going through this process myself. Growing up as a minister's son, I was able to learn a lot from my parents, and I was in that synthetic conventional stage for a long time. But there was a time when I had to go back and begin to examine the things I was being taught. Why did we go to church on Sunday morning? Why did we take the communion? Why do we baptize? Things of that nature. And so as I was able to go back and understand these things, it helped me have faith for myself. And so that becomes the reflective part of this faith. Next is what we call conjunctive faith. And this is the need for rational, intellectual, consistent faith is replaced by the acceptance of a faith that includes ambiguity and mystery. Now, this is one of those stages of faith that, once again, can be difficult for some people to actually get there. Because what happens here is that mystery is okay. You know, when a kid or when somebody's grown up in that part of synthetic conventional faith, when someone brings up the topic of angels or the Holy Spirit, whatever the case may be, there's not a black and white answer with that. And so they may not be comfortable not knowing certain things, because once again, there's a list of what's good and there's a list of what's bad. And so at this phase or step of faith, they're able to have gray areas or places where they are okay with not knowing what's going to happen. You know, there's debate among Christendom about different things. You know, how will the world's going to end? Has 1,000-year reign already happened? Things of that nature. And some of these topics in which we think about and talk about, really at the end of the day, really doesn't make a difference. Yet these are things that end up bringing people apart. And so this group of people is able to look at faith and be able to have some mystery in it and still be okay. And the last one is what we call universalizing faith. And this is characterized by commitment to overcome division, violence, and oppression, and the ability to transcend specific belief systems. Very few people get to this stage of faith. And what's going on here is they're able to be solid in their own faith system, but they're also able to converse with people from totally different faith systems and be able to appreciate what other people believe without this being some type of argument or fight. And it'd be great if many people could get to this place where we're able to look at the differences and also look at the things that are similar between churches and denominations and be able to understand that there are differences, but there's also a common theme. And so those who are able to get to this level have a strong faith that not only affects them, but affects other people as well. Next, we want to look at 8 power tools for developing a healthy relationship with your child. I think part of the process of this moral development and spiritual development is understanding how close you are with your children. Some of the material from here is coming from a book called Teach Your Children Well by Don Otis, and so I want to make sure I give him credit as well. And one of the first power tools we talk about is the power of involvement. Then when it comes to your children, there's a part of you every single day that you need to be making sure you're spending time with them, that they're watching every single thing you do. I think about my own children, and sometimes I say things that are a little crazy, or say things that are off the wall, or even a little off color as well. And they end up repeating these things. And I wonder where it comes from, and the fact of the matter, it comes from me. And so one way we communicate our values is by spending time with them. This way kids are able to see how we really live our life versus just hearing us talk about it. Also, it helps them to feel a part of your life whenever you spend time with them. And it doesn't have to be anything major, just maybe we're snuggling with them for a few minutes or reading the books and things like that. But these small things show that we want to be involved. But as the third point says, our lack of involvement communicates the value we place on our children. That if they are never getting our time, then they are not really at the top of our chain when it comes to looking at the good things about them. And so we want to make sure that we are spending time on this power tool of involvement in their lives. The next is the power of humility. In this process, what we are able to do is to understand our own sinfulness and to understand that we have to make apologies as well. There has been times where I have punished my children for something they did not do, or raised my voice when I shouldn't have done that. And so being able to say that you're sorry to your children is huge, because once again, if they're able to see you say that you're sorry, it helps them to see that forgiveness is a good thing, and they're more willing to practice this themselves. And it helps your kids to see that you're not perfect and you're not expecting perfection from them. Also, this act of confession reinforces our children's respect for us. That, I've heard tons of stories and have seen examples in my own life where certain people will say one thing with their voice, but their life totally looks different. And they will never apologize for that. And so when kids are able to see you actually apologize for these mistakes, it helps them to grow. And also telling your children, I don't know, helps your children see that life is a learning process. That there are some things we simply don't know. And we shouldn't just want to simply make up an answer to get them to leave us alone. That there's some things we would just need to go figure out or to get more education or information in. But when your kids see that you don't know everything, I think it actually helps them too, because it helps them see that there's more things to learn. Even when they get old like us, there's still a learning process in their faith that they can grow in. Next is the power of community. And what community simply means is we view the family as a community where each person in the family has something to offer to the rest of them. And so this may be a simple thing as each person having a chore which they do, but what happens is everybody realizes that their part and their role is so important to everyone else that we can't function as a family if everyone doesn't pull and do their part. And so when kids see themselves being a part of this group and seeing they're loved and worthy and a part of this community, they're willing to do anything for you. One thing that's quite interesting to me is when you think about gangs and things of that nature, one of the common themes we see when it comes to gangs, or many reasons why they're able to get so big and they stay so strong, is that everybody in that gang feels important. They feel this sense of community, and they would do anything in their ability to protect each other because they know that other people would do that for them as well. And so if you imagine doing it in your own biological family and the results that could come from that. And if they're not getting this attention at home, they will seek to get it from somewhere else. And so they need to understand that it is a community. And community also reminds children that they are not the center of the universe. That's a hard thing for children to understand sometimes, that everything is not about them. The world does not revolve around them. And so there may be times when there's something that they want that others in the family don't want, and sometimes the majority may rule. And they may not get their ways on many occasions. But once again, we have to make decisions that benefit everyone and not simply ourselves. And so helping them to understand community is important for them. Also, the power of the church is very, very important. That our children must see the truth lived out in the lives of leaders. That the people who are standing before them teaching and preaching things of that nature, that I want them to see them actually practicing the things that they preach. And I think that's very important, for them to be able to have people outside their home in which they can talk about these spiritual topics and be able to follow the good examples that they see before them. I feel fortunate for where I live right now. My children have several people which they can look up to who I feel like are spiritual giants, the people who are very strong in their faith. And I think that's a good thing. They can see that outside of the home. Also, intergenerational bridges must be erected. The Bible talks about the older women teaching the younger women. I think there's something to that, where the younger need to get involved with the lives of older people, where they're both able to help and learn from each other and teach each other. That way, this faith, these people who maybe are in the final stages of life, who have so much wisdom and so much faith, they can show and learn and teach that down to these younger people. And also, the church must be a safe place for the lost and helpless. I want you to imagine for a second if a homeless person walks into your church tomorrow and just going through this middle of your service, and everyone walks away from them because they stink. No one wants to sit beside them. But yet, at the end of our services or during the rest of that week, we're singing a song about how we love everybody and how we want to help everybody. Once again, what we're singing, what we're professing doesn't match up with what we're actually doing. And so we need to be a part of churches that's a safe place for the lost and the helpless. That we can find places where, regardless of your race or creed, people are able to come together and able to worship together, and helping our children to be able to see that becomes something that's extremely important. Also, the power of communication. That one thing that I think parents, we don't think about sometimes, and I get this way sometimes as well too, is that we should not judge your children's feelings. That when a child says, I'm upset or I'm mad, I've heard parents say before, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Well, they do feel that way. They're upset, they're mad, and we have to allow them to be able to express that. Now, I struggle with that myself sometimes, but we do have to give them opportunity to express what they're feeling. That shows that we're communicating with them. Also, just being there to listen to them, that we don't always have to fix situations. Both of my daughters like to talk, sometimes about nothing of anything relevant, at least from our perspective, and they can talk for quite a while. But part of being a parent is sitting down and listening to them and hearing what they have to say. And it could be a funny cartoon they saw or something that happened at school to them that day. But the more I'm willing to sit and listen to them, the more it shows I'm willing to be a part of their lives and communicating with them. And sometimes we need to answer stupid questions that can keep the doors of trust open. Sometimes your kid may ask you questions that they know the answer to. And the reason why they're doing that, they're trying to see, can I trust you? If I ask mom about going out to eat or whatever the case may be, and already knowing the answer to this, and she's responding back to me in a positive way, then I'm able to trust that I can listen, I can tell my mom things. But if every time I have a small question, they're shutting me down, and I listen to that, then I'll never get to the place where I can trust them with bigger information. And so this power of communication is important. The next one is the power of example. And I don't think this could be overemphasized or emphasized enough. That our actions always speak louder than all words. That we can preach and teach to our kids every single day about things and tell them what the right thing is to do. But the way we act is going to really show and affect them. That if I'm telling them not to lie, but I'm the one lying, that's a problem. If I'm using foul language, but yet I don't want them to use foul language, once again, that's a problem. We have to be a good example. And the reason a lot of kids end up losing respect for their parents is because they see two different sets of parents. They see the one set of parents that the public sees, and then at home they see a totally different set. And so they end up losing respect for their parents, and because they have not become a good example. And this last one on here talks about how we should never expect anything from our children we're not willing to do ourselves. That if I'm wanting my child to be apologetic, or if I want my child to be respectful to people, then I need to be willing to do that myself. So the power of example is important. The next one is the power of affirmation. And what we'll simply do is finding opportunities to tell our children what they did right. It is always easy to figure out wrong things our children's done. They spilled their milk, their hair's not combed the right way, they got the wrong socks on, their shoes aren't tied. We can find lots of negative things. But when they are feeling affirmed, they will feel affirmed when we're telling them good things that they're doing. And so you try to stop as much as you possibly can and help them to see, this is what you're doing right. Hey, I appreciate you not fighting your brother. I appreciate you brushing your teeth tonight. Anything that's really simple, but you want to continue to affirm them as much as possible. Also, hug and kiss your children as much as possible. I do this a lot. I like hugging my girls, squeezing them, hugging them, everything. I love them to death. And so I like spending that time with them. And I think the more kids are able to see that, the stronger they'll be able to grow, because they know that you care about them. Another thing I think is important as part of this power of affirmation is even showing affection to your spouse in front of your children. Because as they're able to see you sharing this love with your spouse, that helps them to see that things are okay, and that calms them, that affirms them that they're going to be all right. And also, we need to focus more on our children's strengths and less on their weaknesses. I think we're in a society now, we're trying to do too much. Families have something on their calendars every single night. Monday we have a Boy Scout meeting. Tuesday is basketball. Wednesday is church. Thursday is art. Friday is karate. Saturday we go bike riding, whatever the case may be. And these aren't bad things at all, but we end up spending all our time trying to strengthen our kids in the things that they're not good at. They're not good at baseball, so let's put them in this. We're not good at this thing, so we put them in this. And so we end up trying to make them perfect. The problem with perfect is they never will get perfect. And so we try to find what our kids are good at, and we try to strengthen that. All kids are not meant to be straight A students. For some kids, they can be a B or C student. Once again, the most important thing is, are they giving all their effort they can? And if they are, affirm them. Let them know you love them, and don't compare them to their siblings, because once again, that doesn't help affirm them. Also, our final one is the power of prayer. It's important for us to pray daily with and for your children. One thing that I have started praying for, I want to pray for my children that they make good decisions. I want to pray for their spouses they will have down the road. All those things is something that would extremely important. So I think it's important to start looking at that right now. Also, when we pray, sometimes we'll pray about things and we'll ask God for certain things. Let's not forget to remind them of the prayers that God has already answered, that He is faithful, that He does listen to us, and that once again helps them strengthen their faith. And then we have to make prayer a part of the life of the family. I know it's something that can grow in as well. It's good that we do our good night prayers and we pray for our meals. But what about when you're fighting your brother or sister? Isn't that a good time to pray? Or you're really, really mad and you almost said a bad word. Isn't that a good time to pray? And the more we teach them this to be a part of their life, the better decisions that they'll make. And I think this last slide pretty much sums it up. That raising spiritual children does not happen on accident. Your children won't just magically wake up one day being strong Christian people. We must take the opportunity and advantage of teaching our children as they come. That we always look for teaching opportunities to show them the right way. Hope that you've enjoyed this video.